I would say let this get this party started where it's about 2
Is it
minutes
a
after.
party? All righty. Well, hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome back to our monthly Tiny Talks. We're glad y'all are here. And for our inspector chat, tonight's Tiny Talks, we're going to have our inspectors answering questions. So I just want to say that any opinions given by even an employee of NOAA are not necessarily the opinion of NOAA certified. Kind of my little caveat I got to put out there. Also, we'll be having another Tiny Talks August, I believe it's the 15th. It's the third, actually 22nd. It's the third Tuesday in the month, and it's going to be at 7 p.m. I have a builder lined up. I'm not going to say who it is till I get the email back that he's definitely on. So anyway, we're going to have some good speakers coming up here in the near future for you guys. And just if you, I don't know if I said this, if you have any questions, raise your hand. You can ask it in person, or if you're too shy to do that, you can pop it in the chat and I'll read the question for you. Thank you so much. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry, our lovely operations manager.
Well, it looks like our one inspector that we have on right at this particular moment just took a phone call. He's probably calling the other inspectors to tell them to get on the Tiny Talks chat.
Yeah, Tony said he'll be right with us in a few moments.
Okay. As you all know, we did put into play now that we do require plans as of July the 10th. Those plans are whether you desire to do the NOAA Plus standard or the NOAA standard. Those plans do not have to be something fancy. They can be hand drawn as long as everything on the checklist is on those plans and the inspectors can read them. We do ask that you send your plans in prior to starting your or even scheduling your stage one, because that way the inspectors do have a chance to go through your plans to make sure everything is right. And if you need to change something, you know it prior to getting to that stage in your inspection. The difference in the IRC and the NOAA Plus, we state that the NOAA Plus, in the past, we've always said it's more suitable for full-time habitation. But with the IRC, with the amendments that we've been put for the NOAA standard, is now what most of your municipalities are going to ask for, because they are built according to the national building codes. There is several differences in those, and I will let the inspectors or Robin, either or, explain those differences because they're more object to it than I am.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in just a little bit here on that. In the past, you know, we started out with a product. There were two. The NFPA 1192 for travel trailers and ANSI 119.5 for park models. And then some people were just building whatever they wanted to build. Well, as things came along, you know, the park model standard is for 8'6" wide or greater. However, the municipalities were asking for something more than the NFPA 1192, which really didn't have any structural in it. So a lot of them went for the ANSI 119.5. And so when we're talking about having your homes accepted into the different jurisdictions, California has adopted a lot of ANSI 119.5 or ANSI Plus or NOAA Plus, which basically the NOAA Plus takes the ANSI standard as its base and then builds on top of that with 2x4 studs, 16 inches on center, nailing patterns, and different things that make, you know, our values up from the R values in in ANSI 119.5. And so the jurisdictions like in Brevard County and in California and Maine and other places that have accepted the RV standard as a standard for a home that you could live in full-time as an accessory dwelling unit or as an independent living facility, that's one way that you can live when the jurisdiction says you can live in an RV, basically, as long as it meets certain criteria. And usually it's a ANSI standard and not using RV building techniques, using home building techniques and siding and roofing, and so it looks like a home. So that's one, and that's what we call the NOAA Plus standard right now. And you know, there's places in Idaho that have adopted the NOAA Plus standard as the standard for tiny houses that are going to be lived in full time. Now, get over here onto the other standard, which is an IRC, currently an IRC based standard. However, it doesn't have to stay an IRC based standard, but it's what the other jurisdictions are looking for as far as full-time habitation. For instance, Colorado is looking for a tiny house that's built to the 2018 IRC, and everyone uses a National Electric Code, but 2018 IRC and the 2018 I codes. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to stay there. They have said that if ASTM comes out with their initiative or something else comes along, that they will take a look at that as a possibility. So that's in a 20,000 foot overview. You have what used to be the only standard that we inspected to, which was the ANSI 119.5 base. And then we wanted something that was more a dwelling based standard. And right now we're using IRC as that base, but we're open to other standards as they're coming along. There's two currently that are in the works, the ASTM initiative and the ICC initiative. So that's kind of my 2 cents and we put on our website that if you're not looking for full-time habitation, then you go with the NOAA Plus standard, which is for temporary and seasonal use. However, it does up the grade from the RV standards, so it's more suitable for full-time habitation. But if you want to go all the way to quote unquote full-time habitation, we say go with the NOAA standard for tiny homes, and we're calling them tiny homes instead of tiny houses when they're full-time habitation. So that being said, anybody else want to jump in there and clarify what I just
Any of the
put out there?
inspectors? Tony, Rich, Frank?
So,
No,
well,
go ahead, Rich.
I chimed in, I logged on a little bit late. But I'm assuming we're looking at differences between the NOAA Plus and the IRC. Is that correct?
NOAA, yeah, the NOAA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, some of the main differences right off the bat are, would be the egress window. If you're on what we're going to call the base floor or your standard floor, you need to meet 5.0 square foot egress. And if you're in a loft, because it's a raised or elevated area, you would need to meet 5.7 square foot. I'm just going to kind of breeze through these a little bit, and then if somebody has a specific question, we can jump back to it. The second thing would be arc fault breakers. They would be required in the panel in all locations except wet areas, essentially, which would be your kitchen, your bathroom, and I believe off the top of my head, outdoor receptacles. And then the ceiling insulation, that jumps up, and hold your breath, but that jumps up to R30. So that's a big one for a lot of people, and understandably so. Other than that, Tony, help me out if I'm missing something really key. But I believe that's off the top of my head. I mean, there's other small nuances, but that's the
Right.
bulk from what I recall off the top.
Yeah, it's back to the arc fault though. They are required in the kitchen and the
In the kitchen
bathroom.
too?
Yeah,
Okay.
and the bathroom.
In the
Um, there is an exclusion on there for garages and
Oh, yeah, that's right.
your outside outlet. But yeah, the other thing is the insulation. As far as that goes, I think we're requiring R30, if I remember right, in the ceiling, but they're
Mhm.
still staying with 13s in a wall and 13 in the floor.
We jumped it up front in the floor to R19
Yeah.
You
to be
did?
more in line, with the code.
Okay. And then what was that? I had it just on top of my head. There's another thing in there that, headroom changes underneath the loft. It drops down to 6'4" underneath the loft.
Mhm.
And in the living area, that changes from the 6'6", I think goes up to 6'8" now under the IRC.
Mhm.
Then there was a
Yeah, you
change
have
in it.
inhabitable space in hallways not less than 6'8".
Yeah.
Bathrooms, toilet rooms and kitchens not less than 6'4", exceptions lofts.
Exceptions for the loft, right, up top.
Yeah.
Loft sizes remain the same because we used appendix Q on that.
Mhm.
Stairways
They remain
and
the
landing
same.
platforms.
The landing platform, I think the headroom changed. I don't know if it changed, but we're only, it's 6'2" now, isn't it, Robin? Off that
Well,
platform.
yeah, on the platforms, it's always been 6'2", a requirement for 6'2". However, when you build a tiny house that is on wheels, it's going to be up at least 22, 24 inches off the ground. And with that increase in height, you can't get that 6'2" on the landing and still have, even if you go with the minimum 6'4" ceiling height. So what we have done, we have moved from, I think it was 16 to 18 inches from the top of the loft down to the landing. And we've changed that to 26 inches, that you can go 26 inches. You can still crawl in with a 26-inch, but with that 26-inch, you can get a 6'2" ceiling height in the landing, from the landing. And the other thing, while I'm on the landing, we included the landing as part of the loft, so that if you want to put an egress window in that meets the 5.7 square feet, 20 inches wide minimum, 24 inches tall minimum, 44 inches minimum to the sill or to the opening, that will give you a place to put it. So if you can't get it in the walls of the loft, the other obvious place, which was in appendix Q, is to put a skylight in that would meet the egress requirements.
Mhm.
Any of our members that are on, do you guys have any questions that concerning, if not this, something else? But we were just trying to clear up, even though we had a tell-all on last Friday, I wanted to give you the opportunities to maybe ask some more questions if there was some confusion.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Joe Serrano, I am with the Thimby project. Garrett Pullman is our project manager, just to identify myself. I'm with Tent Makers. I'm the executive director. I have some questions about the arc fault breakers that you mentioned. You mentioned that the arc fault breakers are also required in the kitchen and bath, and typically, at least under building code, it would be GFIC as opposed to AFIC. Is that correct?
Yeah, and in the kitchen is though you can use the combination. The kitchen still has to, whether you're going to use an arc fault or not, it still has to be GFCI protected. Arc fault's not a GFCI protection. So you have to use, if you're going to use the breakers, you have to use the combination breaker. If not, use the arc fault breaker on the circuit, but then you can use a GFCI outlet.
Okay, I was gonna ask that
Mhm.
question. So they have an
Yeah.
actual combination AFIC,
Oh, yeah.
GFIC?
Yeah,
Okay.
actually, and you'll see the arc fault breaker will actually have a button on there Most of the time it's red, but there is a manufacturer too that has it in blue. And it'll actually say test right next to it. So as soon as you see that button, you know that it's also an arc fault and GFCI protection.
Okay.
Mm.
My second question is in regards to the insulation. So I'm clear on the ceiling insulation of R30 and floor of R19. If we're framing with 2x6, can we go R15 or anything above the R13 is good, right? I mean, it's not minimum
Oh, yeah,
R13.
yeah. Yeah, everything that we have as far as insulation goes are minimums. You can always increase, go up.
Okay. Okay, and then on the head clearance was one concern. I think we sent an email trying to get clarification on it, and I think the clarification that we got was a 6-foot loft ceiling height or head clearance. And you mentioned that 6'4" is, well, you mentioned it, and I'm just need clarification on our understanding of 6 foot and what I just heard of being 6
Yeah,
foot.
I actually don't know where the 6 foot came from. I don't know of anything that would have been 6 foot, other than the code says that 50% of the room has to be 6'4". Going, the other 50% of the room can go down to 6 foot. And maybe that's where you got that from.
Right, it is actually. That's exactly where I got that from. And so our loft is way less than 50%.
Oh, well,
Uh,
the loft itself, there's no headroom
So when you
requirement
talk about
inside the
what
loft now, inside. We're talking about
inside
underneath the loft. Yeah,
underneath, okay, so yeah, I'm talking about
yeah,
underneath the loft. So if the loft takes up less than 50% of the area inside the tiny house, then the ceiling height underneath the loft, from the loft, bottom of the loft to the top of the floor, what's the minimum requirement? The head clearance.
yeah. So Joe, I think you're kind of getting a little bit confused. It isn't that the loft takes up 50% of the home. It's of the room space. So, and I think where they came up with that is if you have a slant roof. And so
Yeah.
if the roof was slanted, like a shed style roof,
Mhm.
Yeah.
underneath that roof. Yeah, again,
Oh,
what was that?
okay. Yeah, we have a shed roof. I just want to be clear on it
Yeah.
because we're at the point now where we want to do our MEPs, right? So we have a shed roof, and we're gonna have to measure it, but you're talking
But
about
think,
the,
yeah, we're talking about strictly underneath the loft. And see, underneath the loft, normally a loft, the floor of the loft is flat, straight. So in most cases, that 50% rule really doesn't never apply to what we normally are looking at. It's I think, I'm not sure if it was designed for, when they wrote it, if it was for like your like your RVs that have a slide out room. That
Mhm.
slide out room has to have a minimum head height of 6 foot. So I don't know if it's the reason that they did it or not, but in most cases, your loft is going to be flat. The roof or the ceiling underneath the loft is going to be flat if you're in the kitchen or so. So, and I've never seen one. I don't know, one of the other guys may have. I've never seen one yet where one part of the ceiling we'll say over the kitchen, that was one height and it went down to another height.
So
Right.
just to be clear, the height, the dimension from the bottom of the loft to the top of the floor is what's the height?
So
If-
you're talking about
if-
you're talking about the downstairs floor, that would be 6'4".
Yeah, 6'4".
Yeah, let
Yeah,
me
and-
jump in there.
Yeah, I was going to say
Joe,
another
and
clarification on that though is that has to be either a bathroom or a kitchen.
there, yeah. Yeah, your baths and kitchens can have ceiling height of 6'4", according to Appendix Q and Appendix AQ.
Right.
And then your living area is going to be 6'8" minimum,
Right.
but
Yeah.
but in the NOAA plus and the NOAA standard, and the NOAA plus standard, I believe you can go 6'6" in the other living
6'6",
areas.
yeah.
Okay,
But
so that's the difference there, Joe. you're basically, if you think about it, you have a ceiling to your kitchens and your baths. And that ceiling happens to also be the floor of the loft. And the floor of the loft, you're trying to get that as low as possible so you can get as much room in the loft as you possibly can. And so some people will go 6'4". I know it's tight, you know, at 6'4". 6'6" might be easier, 6'8", but really you're trying to get that room up in the loft, and it really depends upon where you start out with the floor height of your tiny house. If you have a deck over, your floor height's going to start out 32 or 36 inches off the ground. If you have a drop axle, you're going to be 22, 24 inches off the ground. And so with that difference, you can really, you want to get somewhere, you know, 40, 42 inches in a loft is comfortable. So that's kind of what you're looking for there, if that helps you out, Joe.
Yep, yes, that clarifies things for us. So I really appreciate that guidance. Thank you.
And then as far as the arc fault, you know, I was in the same school. I said, you know, we have arc faults for everything but GFCIs in the kitchens, and apparently in the new 2020 code, which we have adopted as our standard National Electric Code 2020, it has arc faults in everything else in other areas that I wasn't aware of either. But that's what we're going with, the 2018 IRC right now and the 2020 National Electric Code, if you need to buy those books to read them.
I got it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions?
I've got some.
Yeah.
You're not allowed.
We
see
do
what
have a
Kate-
question also from a member.
Yeah,
Oh.
go ahead and do that one. It's on the same topic, and then I'll jump in.
When does a space become living space as opposed to being a loft, such as a room built on the gooseneck of a gooseneck trailer?
Want me to take that, or
Go ahead, Tony.
there's a series? Yeah, there's a series of things that you have to look at. First, the code says that you have to have a minimum of 35 square feet. The second thing it says is that you have to have a minimum of 5 feet in any direction of floor space. It must be flat 5 feet of in any direction of floor space. The next thing it says is that if you have, we'll say, a shed style roof, when you measure up from the loft floor to the underside of to your ceiling, anything that is 36 inches or less is not counted in that square footage or in that 5 foot area. So you have to eliminate that part. If you have an A-frame roof, the code says if you come in 18 inches from your left and right side, come in 18 inches, then the distance between those 2 points has to be a minimum of 5 feet. If it's less than that, then again, it's not habitable. Now, when we say it's not habitable, it's just that the code is saying it's not habitable. That doesn't define what you wish to use it for.
It's just not counted in the 35 square feet required to be considered a loft. And that 18 inches is the distance from the floor to the ceiling.
Right.
In other words, if you have a gable roof or an A roof, and you go up your exterior walls, and I've seen those where they're 24 inches or they're 18 inches, you count all the way to that wall there with your 35 square feet.
Hey, it's Cage here, the guy who asked the question. That very clearly defines like rules regarding a loft, but in the case that I'm speaking towards, it's we're looking at a space that's 6 feet by 7 feet wide, so clearly the 35 feet are met, and it's got a 6'6" ceiling. It's under that 6'8" minimum of a living space. So can it be counted as a loft and therefore not be bound by the 6'8" ceiling? Or do I need to find a way to get those 2 more inches up above it? and call it a living space.
Is that the space on the tongue of the gooseneck? I mean, on the
Yes,
top
on
of
the
the
tongue of the
gooseneck?
gooseneck.
Yeah, I don't think you can, I'm just trying to think on it. I don't think you'd be able to get any additional, if it's a gooseneck. I don't think you'd be able to get any additional. I first thought you were talking about what we call a reverse loft. But, you know, where the sleeping is underneath the loft and the living is above the loft. But if it's a gooseneck, I don't think.
We
it-
have
it
to
actually
look at that
should
one,
be.
Tony. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
opposed to calling that a loft necessarily,
Yeah,
but you know, that's, what do you think, Rich or Frank?
You,
I
you
mean,
said calling that a loft?
yeah, in other words, he's gonna have a few steps going up to an area that doesn't have anything underneath of it, but it is built on the gooseneck and it's big enough for a loft, but it's, well, how far is it cage off the floor? 4 or 5 feet off the floor?
It will be, counting from the ground, it will be 49 about 50 inches at its floor.
From the ground or from the first floor,
From the ground.
finished floor? From the ground.
The finished floor will be about 50 inches from the ground.
And
So
how
then-
far from the
Okay.
floor of the tiny house?
I know in the past I've seen people use those for living
Sorry,
space.
it's
You know,
50 inches from the base of the floor of the tiny house and 2 more feet from there because it's a 24-inch exact deck from the ground.
Okay, 50
So-
inches up to the quote unquote, this room, let's call it a loft for now, 50 inches up to this loft. And then the loft has a ceiling height of 6'2". Did you say
6'6".
6'6"?
I would say, I mean, I've seen it in the past where, you know, under the ANSI, it could be used either way, sleeping or actual living space, a loft. I think we have to look at that as the exception.
yeah,
um,
it's
And treat it
actually,
just as such because, you know, it's an elevated surface, not due to any
Exactly.
condition that anybody created.
go
It's
either
just
way.
the way it's constructed. So I think we have to have an exception for that and indicate that or update that in our wordings.
It can go
you know,
either
in
way.
our-
Yeah.
Go ahead,
it should be
Frank.
considered a loft, I'll tell you, because it's gonna need guardrails on the open side of it, unless
Oh,
it's
yeah.
actually got a full wall and all. So I think it should be considered a loft, though. It's not a lot different than, you know, some of the homes that we do where they use a reverse loft. And then
Yeah.
they build, you know, they put the sleeping area underneath. So it's not really much different than that. And with those, normally the head height is only around 6'4", if I remember right. Or 6'6", I'm sorry, if I remember right. But I think we should actually look at it as a loft.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Because like
There you
Rich
go.
said, it's an elevated room off of the floor. So,
Get them, boy.
Oh, God. Sorry, guys.
We,
Any more
we had another
questions?
question too, Robin.
Yeah,
Jen Gentry wanted to know, are there any differences in the trailer frame requirements for NOAA Plus or the NOAA standard?
no.
yeah. Mm,
No.
Nope.
Now, the same requirements, the trailer needs to be a built for purpose trailer by a trailer manufacturer. Or if it's home built, or if you modify the built for purpose trailer, it has to have engineering done on it.
Joe?
Yes, thank you. I apologize for this question. I should know this, but I don't. What is the difference between NOAA Plus and just a regular NOAA standard?
The NOAA Plus is an ANSI-based standard with some home building codes attached to it. And then the NOAA standard is the new IRC-based code that we have also included some amendments in there to be able to do on trailers instead of foundations.
Okay, so the
really, Joe,
standard,
The difference, Joe, is some jurisdictions will let you live in an RV, an ANSI product, and others won't. So we're making an effort here to create a product called the NOAA standard, which is based off of the dwelling codes, to encourage jurisdictions to allow you to live full-time in your tiny house. Colorado has already adopted the 2018 IRC as their standard. So that's what we're using for our standard, and basing our NOAA off of that 2018 IRC.
is that standard, the NOAA standard, it's not, although it's not recognized as a legal ASTM standard, right?
Correct. Yeah, we just needed something. We're not a standards development company. That's not what we do. We would love for somebody, ASTM or somebody else, to come up with the tiny house standard. And if it's a good standard, it looks like everybody's going to get behind it in the tiny house industry. We'd rather you guys, the industry, did that. But not having anything and starting out with the RV standards and getting jurisdictions to authorize or okay or put their stamp of approval on the RV products. Yeah, it's been kind of tough, but now we have two standards that you can build to. You can choose when you go in there which standard you're going to build to, and then the IRC based product may not stay IRC based. If ASTM comes along, we're just saying whatever standards that we're going to choose, this one's going to be a little bit more closer to the dwelling codes than the RV standards.
Were you aware that ASTM has a tiny house committee?
Yes,
And they are working on.
I'm on the committee.
Yeah, I am
I'm on
too.
the
So
committee.
yeah, I am as well. In fact, I'm a newcomer to the committee, and so I'm on the ropes right now, just trying to learn the protocol of how that works. Maybe I can pick your brain later, and we can tag team on that. But I think it's very exciting, especially when it comes to recognized standard in relation to financing.
Yeah, well, financing, placement, insurance, it all
Insurance,
plays
yeah.
in there. Yeah. And peace of mind for the end user. Absolutely.
Josiah
One
has
last-
a question. Oh, I'm so
Oh.
sorry.
I just wanted to ask this last question. Let me see. The guy that was just speaking, I'm sorry, I didn't see your name on, but to the whole group anyway, home ownership. That's the primary sort of goal for us, because we want to develop villages, right? Tiny home villages where we can actually create home ownership for extremely low. There are a lot of people that are working, living in their cars. And so we want to be able to provide a village that they can actually purchase the home, and they can, be on maybe on a foundation or a hybrid where you can back it in, drop it on the foundation, but you can always back it back out and take it somewhere. Is that, am I thinking on the right path when it comes to the actual code compliance or recognized certification that we can actually get a mortgage or some type of I don't know if it would be a mortgage, maybe a personal loan or like a car loan or something. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Anybody else want to play in that before I jump in?
You can go ahead.
There is a couple of banks that are offering financing. You can find that on our website as well under the resource tab. Not sure of all the ins and outs for them, but it is Liberty Bank of Utah, and their information is on our website, as well as some insurance companies are also on there that we know do give insurance for tiny homes, and several other resources as well. So that might be helpful for you.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. That's a big deal for us. Thank you.
And Joe, and also too, from a bank standpoint, most banks, if not all banks, if it's a movable home, they won't issue a mortgage for it. But if you take that same house and you put it on a fixed foundation and it's fastened to that foundation, they have a much better chance at getting a mortgage on it. But as long as it's immovable, like on wheels or anything like that, most banks are going to steer away from giving a mortgage on it. They can do a lending on it as if it was a vehicle, but mortgage wise, it's going to be tough.
Maybe it would be maybe based on, like, say, the NOAA Plus, and if it was recognized enough, but at least for now, I'd like to discuss it with our local community bank and try to come up with a product that would be a hybrid between, say, a vehicle and a mortgage for tiny houses that, have more favorable interest rates and fees. That's a primary difference, I think, if anybody has anything.
You're correct there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, the Liberty Bank is the only one that actually uses that I know of, that uses the home as collateral. It's still an RV loan. But the other ones, like Lightstream, they are a personal loan that they call a tiny house loan. You still have to qualify for it personally. They won't repossess your home where Liberty Bank would. Liberty Bank goes out 23 years, which is more than I think some of the other ones go. So that's the difference in the financing. And you're right, Tony, that if it is attached to the real estate, becomes part of the real estate, you have a better chance of getting a mortgage on the property because it's attached. However, and this came out in Colorado, they have approved 2 types of foundations for the tiny homes that are going to be lived in full-time as dwellings. One is a permanent foundation and one is a temporary foundation. And so theoretically, the way they explained it, what if in the wintertime you didn't want to stay in Denver and you wanted to go to Arizona? You would have a quote unquote temporary foundation with a pedestal style hookup like an RV, and you just unplug your tiny house and you drive it to Arizona. And then once it warms up in Denver, you drive it back. I don't know how the banks are going to look at that, because, they could, if you don't pay your mortgage, they might have trouble finding your house if you could take it someplace else. So,
yeah, and I think in most cases, if it's not deeded to the land, you'll have a hard time getting financing as a mortgage now. But a personal loan, you'll probably always be able to get because they'll use the house as collateral. But as far as mortgage goes, I think you're going to find that if it's not deeded to the land, it's going to be difficult.
Justin, you have your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Hi, just a quick statement. We've had some various banks and financing companies come to us. They are treating the non-permanent foundation units as chattel loans. So, movable things similar to what you guys were mentioning with, recreational vehicle loans, et cetera. But there are some pretty big banks out there that have some significant funds and they want to get into this market. They are actively looking for manufacturers. If I find the contact info for some of the agencies I worked with, I'll get it off to the NOAA people, and you guys can advertise throughout your means.
Where do we
But
put that
just wanted
financing
to point out-
information?
Sorry,
Leanne,
go
where do
ahead.
we put that financing information? Do we have a place on our website for that?
Yes, if you go to noaacertified.org, it's under info and it now says resources. So we do have some banking institutions down below. We have Liberty Bank on there, but there's a few more I can't think off the top of my head, but we have added some more in the recent past couple months.
So yeah, Justin, if you could get us that information, or anybody else that gets information about
Mhm.
lenders that are being considerate of tiny houses. And I think you were on the right track
Right.
there, Joe, regarding the community banks. They are, community banks are a lot more likely to listen to you than the big banks.
Absolutely. I know a couple of years ago, I took the initiative and I sent out many letters to banks trying to get them excited about tiny homes, and never heard back from not one of them. So there's a lot of banks that could really do a good business if they would just take the chance.
Oh, yeah, there's money out there. There's money out there.
Yes.
And it's coming. I think, Justin, you hit the nail right on the head. The banks, this movement is not a fad. It is a movement, and the banks are gonna figure it out. Joe, did you still have a question? Your hand's still raised.
Yeah, I do. Justin, thank you for that. I would like to work with you, Robin, or anybody else on the negotiations that I am currently in with our local bank, which is Mechanics Bank here in the San Francisco Bay Area. They have been very supportive of us, and they've pretty much given us the money we've asked for to build our unit. They are sponsoring an AHEAD grant, which is a grant for community projects like ours that has been offered by the Affordable Housing Program through the Federal Home Loan Bank system. So how can I plug in with you, Justin and Robin, to maybe we can brainstorm on the negotiations that I'm going to have with Mechanics Bank on creating a product?
Well, first thought that comes to my mind is we are responding to our builders that have asked for some way to collaborate on these types of issues. And so, Leanne, can you kind of explain what we talked about, creating some kind of a place for that to happen?
Yes. In fact, I asked my intelligent chat monster today for some ideas. What I had a question during our July 7th call about if we ever have thought about having a forum for our builders to bounce off ideas off of. This gentleman was talking about a hot water heater, and he's new in the business, so he just kind of wanted to see if we had, and we don't. We have a Facebook page that I've created for all of our different challenges, but I'm looking into a possible chat forum for us to all go in there and answer questions. We'll have inspectors chime in, not necessarily giving what do I want to say? I don't want to say that yet, but anyway, so but what would you guys think about that? Put it in the chat if you think that's a good idea and you would join in, answer questions or pose questions for those that have been with us since we got started in 2016, 15, 17.
Well, as you know,
Yeah.
as you know, we get them from our builders every day. So
Oh, yeah.
it would be a nice
Definitely.
and it would be nice to have a place where when a builder asks a question and we give an answer, that other people can actually see that, so that they don't have to go ahead and ask that same question. Because
Yeah.
as you know, we get multiples of them every single day, especially on
Yes.
our new DIYers and our new builders.
Yes.
So yeah, that would be, I think, a really good idea.
And
All
then they
right.
could transition from there over to our frequently asked question page. Once that question's been answered, we can move it over there. But in the meantime, Joe, if you want to, you can send it to info@noaacertified.org. We can start a conversation there. And if you need somebody to maybe talk to your local bank or something like that, we might be able to make that happen too.
That would be
Or you
awesome,
can-
I think that's an excellent idea. I had actually a couple of people who, I'm involved in a national movement to try to get all these federal regulators are really not doing their job, holding these banks accountable, like especially Wells Fargo, who just got fined $20 billion. And they've actually, probably budgeted that much just for just to be fined next year. So it's systemic, but we have a lot of leverage. Just got back from Washington D.C. to talk to all these federal regulators to let them know that what's happening on the ground and how it's affecting our communities. So I think that having a larger bandwidth on the topic is definitely going to be very helpful. And so just based on my experience working with other collaborators who have helped me get my foot in the door with Mechanics Bank, I think it would go a long way to get them to open their ears, right? Because maybe they don't even know this opportunity exists. Maybe they just haven't even heard it. Nobody's brought it to their attention. So I would certainly appreciate and welcome the opportunity to be a part of a collaboration with you guys.
I think you're right, Joe, and I think a lot of the banks don't really, or haven't taken the time to look into, don't really understand how big of a movement that this actually is. And I think that once they got an idea of what is really going on out there in the tiny house movement, I think you would find a few more of them looking at getting in on it.
We do have another question from Dan. He is asking, does the loft guardrail have to be 36 inches or can it be a half the distance from the loft floor to the ceiling?
That's exactly what it should be. It's
Yeah.
it was very rare that you're going to need a 36-inch rail up there because you don't have enough headroom. But the 50% rule is what really is always in play. So you measure from the loft floor to the high point of the ceiling. Say it was 48 inches, then your rail is going to have to be 24.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Josiah had a question.
Go ahead, Leanne.
What is the minimum headroom height at the top of my stairs from the ceiling above the loft?
6 foot.
The landing at the stairs? The stair landing, is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm just reading it.
Or the loft head? Can you unmute and ask your question?
Josiah,
Yeah,
unmute
yeah, he
your-
said yes. It's from the landing
Oh.
at 6'2", isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
6'2".
All right. Thank you. Joe, yeah, I think you're in our database, Joe. I know you were in our
Yeah.
previous Tiny Talks.
Yeah.
Me
Or
another Joe.
I had a question. I had a phone call today actually about the what did we decide on the fire extinguisher for the
Think we're gonna
NOAA?
make an amendment, aren't
We did put that in as an amendment that we would
Yeah.
require a fire extinguisher.
Okay,
Within 2 feet of the front door and visible.
yes, I got that memorized. Cage wants to know, is a landing required, or is there a stair type that doesn't require a landing?
A ladder.
Ladder.
Yeah, ladders do not,
That's it.
stairs do.
Yeah.
And you know that one thing that I see a lot of times, guys, is you bring that ladder and you bring your steps all the way up to the landing. There, when you get to within 24 inches of your loft, you're just going to crawl right in. You're not going to step on that top rail. So I have a ship's ladder in a tiny house that we built, and right at that the top rung, quote unquote, we did put a little landing right there for people to step up in there. So you climb up the ladder and then you step on the landing. So really, you're going to see in Appendix Q and in ANSI 119.5 the requirements for the access to the loft, and they allow alternating treads, ship's ladders, and a lot of different ways for you to get up into your loft, and it specifies the distance between the rungs. You can't have more than, what is it, 3/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch difference in your
3/8, yeah,
risers.
3/8 variance.
3/8
3/8,
inch.
yeah.
So there's a lot of rules. I don't know what all they are, but you can read them right there in Appendix Q, and it's available to you in your member portal. We do make those Appendix Q available to you in your member portal.
Justin?
Sorry. Hi, thank you. This is very specific. The question is very specific to my company's product. The requirement for the fire extinguisher mounted within, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The requirement for the fire extinguisher mounted within 24 inches of the primary entryway. Our product is actually has a foldable walls. The entryway wall folds up. It's not accessible when it's in transport mode. We have currently been able to meet this requirement by simply noting where the bracket is supposed to be mounted and locating the fire extinguisher under the sink to be installed in that location when the unit is deployed. Would that meet your guys' understanding of the code, or do we need to find a way to have this fire extinguisher mounted to a wall that's going to move in transport?
No, I think
No,
what you're,
my
I think
my
what you're
vote
on
would
is
be-
good.
Yeah, my
Oh,
vote
Deb,
would be that there are certain things that, that a manufacturer can write in the setup. And one of the things that you would write in your setup of the unit would be mount the fire extinguisher on the bracket by the door.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Sean is
Um,
asking, is there a max step height in the IRC versus NOAA plus?
No,
They're both the same.
it's no different.
Oh, the
It's the
same.
same. Yeah.
They're both the same. And I think it's 12 inches.
Yeah, the only thing that was amended was the height from the landing to the loft itself, that last step. Going from
Yeah, it
that
was made
landing
to-
up onto the loft.
Yeah, and that the loft was part of the landing
Or the
was
landing
part
is
of the
part,
loft.
yeah, right.
All right. I got a question too. Wait a minute, spiral stairways often fall underneath regular stairwells. ANSI isn't clear on this. The spiral stairways, guys. Anybody want to tackle that one?
Yeah, ANSI does spell out in there, I don't know exactly what it is, I have to look back, but they do spell out, if I remember right, a spiral staircase. Again, though, on the spiral staircase, the height of from what, the rise from step to step can't be greater than 3/8 of an inch difference in them. And I think the rise is still, even though it's spiral, I think the rise is still going to be the same as the standard stairs.
Yeah, there's just a half an inch difference between the
Yeah.
rise. It's 7.5 versus 7.
Okay.
All
Hey,
right.
Robin,
Can I
I
ask my,
think we,
can I ask my question yet?
sure.
We forgot, Robin.
Yeah, we forgot.
All right. How is a tiny house text?
How is a tiny house what?
Text.
I don't know.
Text.
I
Oh,
think that might
tax.
change from state to state, but I think they're going to look at it as a vehicle.
It's not, everybody paid enough taxes on everything else.
Yeah, be
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah,
Did you,
right.
you forgot about that?
Yeah, it'd be nice.
No, here's the reason why I bring that up. Obviously, if it's considered an RV, then you're not paying I think they're called ad valorem taxes, for the schools and the roads and the, fire department, police department, all of that. But you're using those services. So I believe the jurisdiction is going to figure out if you put your ANSI product in your side yard or your backyard in LA, I think they're going to figure some way out to create a tax because you are using those services.
Well, wouldn't it still be
Yeah.
considered property tax? I mean, Lots of
No,
states
not if it's,
charge
not if it's on
on
wheels.
cars and stuff.
It
If
would
it's
be,
not
it'd
attached.
be, it would be personal property, so they might have some kind of a, but it's a personal property that you're living in full time, so you're actually sending your kids to school, you're using everything else just like you would at home. So I think they've got to figure that part out. But currently they are not taxed the ad valorem tax that I know of. I don't know of any jurisdiction that taxes an RV that's still on its wheels as a home.
The only thing that might change is I think California, they accept them in as ADUs. And I think they might tax it as an ADU, not tax it maybe, but maybe add it to the property tax of the home that where the ADU would reside.
Yeah, that's very possible.
Now they'll figure
Colorado,
out, let's be honest, they're gonna figure out how to get our money. You don't have to worry about that.
well, Colorado has approved a tiny house on wheels as a dwelling, as long as it's built to the 2018 code and inspected under their modular program. And it will be attached to the property. And it will be taxed as real estate, as a home. So that's a pretty for sure. That's a pretty for sure thing, guys. But here's my question. Colorado has approved that either a permanent or a temporary foundation. In the scenario that I just said, when the tax assessor determines whether you're going to pay taxes on your home or not, if you're building a home, I'm a builder too, so when I'm building a home, if I haven't gotten my certificate of occupancy by January 1, I'm still paying taxes on it as land. But as soon as I get my CO, then next year they do charge taxes on the structure too, and my taxes go up. But my thought was, what if you take your tiny home on a temporary foundation, and on the day after Christmas, you decide to go on a vacation for a week, and your home isn't sitting there on January 1 that year? Do you pay taxes on it?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm in Georgia and I put a tiny house on the back of my property. I had to get a permit to get it there. So that was last year. So this year we got our tax statement and it definitely included that there. It went up a few $100s, the taxes did for it.
Right, but what I'm saying is if you had your tiny house, which is on temporary foundation, and on the day before the first of the year, you pulled it off and you brought it back after the first, so it wasn't there on January 1 of this year, legally, you have a leg to stand on that. Hey, you can't tax me on that with the current laws, the way they are.
Kat, did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to, remember Melanie from the tiny home show in Pinellas Park? She has the tiny home that she had put on the land. I believe it's in Virginia. And she went to the county and basically said, look, I'll let you tax me on my home. Just let me have it on my home, on my land. So she was willing to pay for the square footage, the taxes on the square footage, just to be able to get the availability of having the tiny home on the land. So I think it's a give and take between, if you're in an area prone to allowing the accessory dwelling units, the county definitely is going to always find a way to get our money. But if you're in a community where they're not allowed, like where she was, that was part of her ability to get the area changed to allow the tiny homes on wheels, because she basically said, I'll pay my taxes, but when everyone else's house burns down, I'm just going to drive away and then come back and still pay my taxes, which was good for the county. So I think it's just going to be dependent on where you live in the community and how they, try to get you.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
they're all still trying to figure it out.
Right.
I'm
Um,
not taking,
I,
but you also need to take care of the molding. like
does
I do.
anybody else have any questions?
I have a question. Well, not
don't
me
count.
personally. It's not my question. Can you have a step on the landing to make it easier to step into the loft?
Step on the
And it's
landing.
no longer on, and now, I would say not.
I've seen
I
that
mean-
on some. 26
wouldn't-
inches was a little bit too far, and so they put a little step up there. I've seen that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it works or not with you guys, but I have seen that.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's, actually, I really don't know whether it's legal or not. I don't think I've ever even seen that addressed.
I wouldn't say no, because tiny houses are unique in character and size and space is of the essence. I would say that, each situation would be a little different but I personally don't see a problem with it. Because if you think about it on a residential building type of setup, it's the same as a tiny house. So, all stairs have to be within 3/8 inch of each other, except when you get to a landing, you can break the cycle from a lower half a set of stairs to the upper half.
Right.
So that you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
have to be fluid, in there, say you had a 7-inch rise on the bottom set and then a landing, and then the top set, you had an 8-inch rise. You could definitely do that. I mean, I know this isn't that circumstance, but I don't see the harm in having a step.
I don't see the harm in it either. I always thought 26 inches was a heck of a step. But like Robin. said,
Especially for
most-
short people like me.
Yeah, oh yeah. But like Robin said, most people are going to crawl into it versus step into the loft.
Yeah.
Right.
The only thing you have to watch is once you put a step there, because the code says that landing has to be minimum of 18 by 20. So once you put a step there, you reduce that size. That's the only thing you got to watch. But I think that's, one of those things that's like tomato, I mean, I think I really think it should be allowed, like Rich said. I really don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, and Tony, we might want to put something in writing and on the stair section as a little amendment to that, to clarify that part too. Because this won't be the only time it's going to be asked of us.
Right.
Unless the landing was larger and unless instead of 18 inches deep, unless it was like 25 inches deep and you used a step with like a 7-inch run, then you still would have your 18 by 20 landing, but then you'd have a step. I don't know. It's something we should really discuss, I think.
Yeah.
See how
Maybe you can
Robin
put
feels
that on the
about it.
next agenda, Sherry, for us to, the next time we, inspectors get together. Well, it's past 8 o'clock. Is there any other questions that we need to address or? Sherry?
I don't see
do
any
we get-
others. I got some I can handle by email. I think we're good. Anybody else? Speak now.
I just want to say thank you so much. Been so informative. I'm glad to know that there are people like you out there that help us when we're drowning. So hope you got a lot of lifesavers.
It's a
All
first
right.
time builder. Let me say thank you. This has been great.
Yes, thank you very much.
Nice
I
to see
definitely want to
everybody.
say thank you to all of our members for joining tonight and for asking and participating. We love being able to do this for you because it answers questions that we may have as well as questions you may have. And we are
Yeah.
always willing to listen to suggestions because without you, we wouldn't be here. So as always, if you have suggestions or any questions, don't hesitate to email myself. I'm sure 90% of you have my email, or you can email the info and we'll get those questions answered, or take your suggestions and see where they go. So again, thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
inspectors.